everybody, I'm Hannah, the Kearsarge Food Hub.
Hey everybody, I'm Julie, Farm Education Coordinator here at the Food Hub. We are in the Three Sisters garden here at Baby Beet Farm that we planted with the third graders. We are doing that project to help them learn about not only this indigenous way of growing, but about plants in general and how these plants work together in kind of a companion planting way.
We're actually standing in for Leon today in our summer gardening video series because we have a very short window to learn about hand pollinating the corn in the Three Sisters. If you don't do this in your garden, you may not get any kernels on your corn. So we've never done this before.
It's time for everything.
It's the first time for everything, but we're gonna give it a go. We're gonna hand pollinate our corn, so let's go check it out.
All right, we found some corn to try to hand pollinate. So the reason we hand pollinate is because corn is wind pollinated. If you picture a big giant field full of corn, which is how it's usually grown conventionally, all the pollen, which is released on these tassels, might kind of naturally get blown around and land on the silks, which need to be pollinated in order to grow a kernel. Something we learned is that each silk is responsible for one kernel. If one little silk doesn't get a little piece of pollen on it, that kernel doesn't develop. So it's really important that the pollen reaches the silk. When we grow in smaller groupings, or the first year I tried this, I did it in a row. So if you think about the wind blowing it around, there's less of a chance it's gonna reach the silk. In order to make sure it does, we can hand pollinate. The way we do this is we come up here to the tassel. We find a tassel that has some, I don't know if you can see any pollen coming out. It's in these little dangly bits. So what we do is we can cut very gently one of these, and then we'll bring it down. We just want it on the silk. And our friend Leon told me that you can even just leave that right there, which gives it a better shot of getting pollinated. And it's that simple. So everywhere you have a silk, which is sometimes more than one on each corn stalk, but sometimes just one, you want to do that to each one. So over here you can see that this ear of corn, there's no silks here at the top. I think we have a critter that's eating them. So what our friend Leon told us we can do is we can just peel it back a little bit to expose the silk, and then do the same thing with pollinating right on top like that. Something that is important is the time window. Ideally, you know, about 10 days after the corn silks come out, that's when we want to hand pollinate. We're a little late, so we'll see what we get.
Good luck.